Okay, once again, everybody, thank you so much for joining in. A very good afternoon to all our attendees here today. My name is Shruti Sundaresan, and on behalf of the Rohini Nilekani Philanthropies, I'd like to welcome you all to this session this afternoon. Um, this session will be led by experts from the Saathi Development Services. We have Sharad from IKM Fellows, we have Shamir, and from PACTA, we have Nivedita, who will be walking us through different aspects of finance, legal, and compliance regulations.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope my presentation is visible. Uh, and my topic, which actually talks about compliance challenges and the key challenges in 2025, the year that we are running. So I've just done a quite a kind of a summary for all of you. Now, we know the challenges around compliances, and some of the key challenges around compliances today for the not-for-profits is something like this. There is a continuous churning that's happening in the regulatory landscape. Now, this change or churning is not only very quickly happening, but it is also very complex. So there is an additional element of complexity to the regulatory changes that are happening. So it's very important for us to be able to understand, be not only be aware, but also to understand the nitty-gritties of these regulatory changes that are happening in the landscape. The related point is in terms of burden of compliance. So as you have regulatory changes, as you have the more complexity in terms of regulations and statutes, you also have compliance burden, which is in terms of detailing also going up. So for instance, things like the FC4, things like the 10B and the 10BB, all of them have become like, huge documents for us to report. Now, I will not get into the background as to why this kind of an increased burden of compliance, what I call as compliance fatigue, is the reasons for that. But we know that the reality is that we have increased burden of compliance. I was looking at the compliance calendar on a monthly basis, and I was seeing that at least 7 odd days in a month, on average, go towards some compliance or the other. And therefore, the compliance calendar is compliances per se, therefore, deserves so much more attention, given the fact that, 1/3 of our total work month in a month is actually dedicated to some compliance or the other. In some months, it's even more, some it's less. So the burden of compliance has, and the extent of detailing in terms of those compliance has also increased. The third is digitization, technology, and no face-to-face interface. This is again a challenge. Digitization for small NGOs becomes a challenge. Use of technology, all regulatory compliances as well as reporting compliances in terms of the regular reporting are all technology driven today, and that there is no face to face interface as far as understanding the requirements, understanding how to comply. There is no such thing. So that in fact is itself becoming a very big challenge, because there's no person to go to, as was the case maybe 5 years back or maybe 10 years back. So technology, while it is also facilitating the digitization and technology for small not-for-profits is becoming a challenge as well. The next one is penalties. Now, the way compliance, non-compliance is being looked at is not with any kind of leniency. The penalties are very high. So that's another challenge of compliance. So understanding compliance, doing the compliance, and ensuring that the compliance is done correctly is what is the real challenge. Okay, because the other side, the flip side of non-compliance, entails not only penalties but also some kind of existential risk that I look at. The next one is capacities. So organizations which look at institutional matters do lack internal capacity, and therefore the PATIC is probably one big resource that's available freely for you, where this capacity can be beefed up. So the internal capacity on institutional matters itself becomes a challenge, because the complexity is increasing. Unless we match up to the complexity in terms of our own awareness, knowledge, and ability to deliver, we will not be able to, the demand side and the supply side kind of equilibrium will not happen. That is what I want to also say. Then the last one is governance. Now, we have been for very long used to very loose governance structures in not-for-profits. That needs to be kind of, fixed, because governance structures now need to look at, the organization in terms of a higher level of understanding of regulations as well as compliance. So these are all related issues in terms of challenges around compliance, and these challenges are going to increase. And that is why I say compliance is a big risk for organization. I mean, it's negatively a negative connotation. I don't want to create a sense of fear, but I want to create a sense of urgency for you. And I think the effort at PATIC is primarily to help you be your friend, be your companion in terms of being able to help you. There is a lot of knowledge and resources that are available, and they are being added more and more. Now, coming to what are the preparations for these compliances in 2025, I have put down a couple of them. The most important one that is going to happen very soon is, of course, your renewal of 12A and registration and your ATG approval. This is the backbone of any not-for-profit organization. I consider these registrations as the topmost registrations to have, without which the distinction between charitable and non and for-profit just disappears. So the first and foremost thing that you please remember is that for most organizations that got a 5-year registration or approval under 12A and ATG, this is the biggest, kind of event, I would say. I would call it a challenge. I will call it an event for the not-for-profits for 2025. Now, your registrations and approvals would be valid up to 31st March 2026. Please remember that's uh, 2026 of March. However, you have to file for renewal of your 12A and ATG 6 months prior to the date of your registration. You all know that your registrations are now for a finite time period, which is 5 years in most cases where already existing registered organizations went in for re-registrations. Now, this entire 12A and 80G area has also become a very complex one because there have been a lot of clarifications, lot of changes, lot of condonations, and one needs to see the 12A and 80G registration certificate to be able to see what needs to be done. I'm talking of a general situation where all registered entities as on 1st April 2021 have got 5 years of their certification. Now, 10AB is the form that you need to file by 30th of September 2025. Now, some of the organizations that I talk to, they say it's our assessment year 26-27, and therefore it's only after 31st March that we need to get back. No, you need to apply 6 months, which means there is hardly any time left for you to, prepare yourself. The form 10AB is the form that you would need to file separately for 12A renewal and ATG approval renewal. Okay. Uh, you would also need to ensure that all documentation, all required paperwork for the 10AB is in place much before that, because this 10AB, as per our current understanding, will be taken up, and after a due process of inquiry by the CIT exemption, will the renewal be granted, just like FCRA. Okay. Now, at the same time, I would hurriedly say that, well, since this is the first renewal after the re-registrations, and for the department to handle so many renewals with the process of inquiry, we will have to see what is the level of process of inquiry. However, for us, the 10AB filing and getting our 12A registration and renewal in time is very, very critical. How? Because this makes us a charitable or a not non-charitable entity. And donors and other stakeholders would look at this renewal at the quickest, just to ensure that they do not have any kind of uncertainty about their funding. Now, please also remember that that subsequently small NGOs whose turnover is up to 5 crores in the past 2 years, that is 23, 24, and 24, 25, will get their registrations and approvals for 10 years. Others will get it for 5 years. Now, intermediate period registrations that have happened or provisional registrations that have happened, I'm not capturing them. However, you have to be very mindful where you have got provisional registrations or you have had any corrections to be made because there were wrong filings. This is the normal situation of 5 year registrations that were granted in 2021. Now, the second biggest challenge that I look at even more than FCRA or any other portal is basically the income tax and TDS. You know, why I'm saying that is because I think a lot of the renewal business will also be linked to what is the kind of status of proceedings on your income tax portal as well as on traces. Now, we have to give due uh, importance to addressing these, outstanding matters timely. Because I again want to say that the 12AB and 12A and APG renewals may hinge on our being clear as far as these income tax and traces portal is concerned. So please have a look at what are the proceedings. I know of a large number of organizations where there have been mistakes in filing, mistakes in terms of computation, and demands have been raised, and demands have not been settled for years and years. I would only like to kind of caution that what view the department takes at the time of evaluating your 10AB is something that is unpredictable. So if there is still a window open for you in terms of seeing how to address those issues prior to your 1080 being considered for renewal. The third one is, of course, FCRA. Now, as far as FCRA is concerned, in terms of reporting, the FC4 is becoming even more complex. Okay, so in terms of reporting on assets, in terms of detailing the various assets, project-wise assets that you have detailed, in addition to reporting expenditure and in incomes on by project, you have to also report the asset bit of it. More important than the FC4 itself for you is the kind of role that the chartered accountant now plays. In fact, the FC4 is becoming more a challenge for your chartered accountant because he now needs to give details of expenditure by projects. He needs to also give, a kind of a certification saying that this is true and fair. The certificate itself has changed. So what I'm trying to say is that when the stat auditor or your CA actually is doing a FC audit, then probably a higher amount of due diligence will now onwards be done by that auditor, and you should be prepared with your audited financials for FCRA more, because it's in a way telling the MHA that I have done just like the 10B and 10BB. It's stating that the audited accounts give a fair and true picture of the organization's financials. So to that extent, that thing has that requirement for the chartered accountant will actually entail higher amount of kind of due diligence by them. So you have to be very careful. Now, as far as new entities are concerned who have not obtained registrations or uh, prior permissions, the application process also has got rationalized, which means a lot of extra information now is to be provided, not just for prior permission, but also for the first time registration that will happen. So recently also there has been changes in terms of what additionally needs to be reported. So you have to be very careful in terms of seeing that you are compliant, you are on the right side in terms of being able to kind of handle it. So this is the third one that I can say is going to, be a challenge for 2025. Then, of course, I just want to mention some of the others that are important. So the labor codes, I mean, I always talk of social security benefits, and a lot of people here today also are attending my courses or have attended or have worked with me. So the labor codes, as far as collapsing of the social security laws is concerned, is actually now going to become a reality. So there is going to be a huge change in the way we work on the HR front. Okay, on the HR front means that it will have implications in terms of finances, in terms of compliances. So unless we understand what the definition of wages are, what is kind of the social security contribution now going to be, what happens to the traditional way of engaging contract workers instead of employees, for our core activities, which is now not going to be permitted. So those are very major sweeping changes. Okay, you have concepts where fixed term employees will now be entitled for gratuity instead of the 5 year period. So there are these changes that are happening, and we would suggest that compliances on social security is going to be an equally important compliance in terms of your 12AB and your 80G, because other law compliances which affect your objectives is also going to be one of the reasons for any punitive action by the income tax department. So I consider the introduction of the labor codes and the next 1 year in terms of transition as a major adjustment challenge for not-for-profits who are actually required, as it is the sector in terms of compliances on social security is poor. But let me tell you, everything is now getting integrated in terms of analytics, in terms of portals speaking to each other. Gone are the days when it will take years and years. It's very easy for the departments now to migrate information or to transfer information and then corroborate. So it's very equally important that we are honest and committed to in terms of whatever we are reporting. The next one is, of course, the direct income tax bill. The income tax, the ITB 2025 will not throw up challenges. I think it will help us in certain sense in bringing the entire code of taxation for not-for-profits at one place. However, there are certain changes that have been proposed in the draft income tax bill for not-for-profits, which are going to also then make changes for, we will not have anything like a 9A deemed application. We will have everything related to only accumulation in terms of corpus, breaking corpus, loans and borrowings, all those things. There are going to be quite a bit of change in terms of the way we work. So one has to also look at that. I want to emphasize the issue of Darpan, and why I want to say that is because the NGO Darpan is now the de facto KYC, as I call it, for the not-for-profit. So little importance has been given to the Darpan. It's basically a KYC for bank purposes, as you would all know, and therefore please ensure that all data related to the various fields on Darpan are up to date, so that there are no questions in terms of when it comes to taking facilities from any other for any other purpose, because everybody is now looking at this particular database and as the database about your organization, and it's available in public in a certain sense. It can be just exported to in a format, and that report will be available. So I suggest this is also not only a KYC but also opportunity to talk to the world. So this is something that I would want you to look at. Then there are two, three things that I want to say. One is, I mean, we have talked about the complex regulatory landscape. Now, the big compliance, the big preparedness for compliances should be in terms of in-house capacity. I do not recommend that you depend entirely on consultants. I'm not against consultants. I'm not saying that you do away with them, but please improve the capacity in-house of your organizations, of your people, so that they at least can understand, be aware of, understand the reason why these compliances are being talked about. This is very, very important. Now, there are Patic, for instance, is itself in-house. I mean, creating an in-house capacity for we do other initiatives, but then this capacity building on the institutional fund front is something where we need to be prepared. I think the last 4 5 years has given us enough time to see that we prepare ourselves. It's not just programs; it's our own institution which has to be strong enough. Only then programs will follow. So this is something that I look at as preparedness for 2025 and onwards, and this cannot be undermined. There's no big cost here. It's only a mind shift or a change of the mindset in terms of being able to learn more than what you probably need to do on your job. The last one is, of course, risk management. Now, never was the landscape, not just regulatory, every which way of this country, never was the landscape so challenging for the not-for-profits. And therefore, while for the for profit, risk management is the first lesson. We have still not learned those lessons. Of course, a lot of organizations are now getting to know that risk management is important because it hits directly at the very base of our organization. So I would then say, consider risk management, consider identifying risk, consider a risk management process, a risk management policy, identify and address your risks so that the loss because of these risks and the internal controls that you put in place ensure that your organization is better able to kind of negotiate or navigate those kind of risks that I think were never never so intense in as far as I understand over the last about 2 decades, and the intensity of uh, these risks is only going to increase. So I thought I would just mention. I stop my screen. I thought that these are some areas that I would like you to work on in the next about uh, couple of months. Look at these in a more focused manner, and then you cannot be addressing all of them at one time. So look at a plan. Probably every that's what I say. Look at a plan. What are the ones that need to be addressed on priority? For instance, I say the 12AB and 12A and ATG is probably the topmost priority in terms of seeing whether you are on the right side in terms of getting that renewal or not. So with that, I hand it back to Shruti.
I think there is a question that has been asked by Jyoti. Sharad, would you like to answer it?
Yeah, so I was about to write the answer to Jyoti's question. Now, Jyoti has said what happens as far as compliances requirement for board of directors or trustees. Let me tell you that as far as the registration requirements or renewal requirements are concerned, then these people have to actually at the time of registration provide their details, their Aadhaar, PAN, and their addresses, their occupation. They also have to provide a pro forma double A in terms of a declaration which has to be notarized and also attached, and those details. Whenever a new board member is added, then also the pro forma double A as part of the FC6E requirement is also there. You will also have to file the details of these board members in your FC4, which is your annual return. So uh, there's a question in terms, there's a follow-on question which says any ongoing legal issues. Yes, so if there are any ongoing legal issues, probably it will be the right to look at whether to continue with that board member or not, because uh, rather than the IBCI, CBI, or any other department of the MHA actually bringing that to your notice, and that can very be very prejudicial to the very request that you have made through that particular form. So it is better to continuously you might not be able to very explicitly, but you have to be very cautious in terms of seeing whether there are any proceedings, any kind of indictment against these board members, which you should be mindful of. I'm not saying you please take an undertaking or anything, it'll actually put them off, because they are also supposed to provide this pro forma double A, which is an undertaking in a certain sense. So it's a very delicate matter in terms of legal, any kind of ongoing legal cases. But you have to be on your toes to identify and ascertain, because that such situations can have a very bad detrimental effect on the application that you have put. So that's my answer at this stage.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for this great clarity, because it's very important to us also, because this is the mandatory field which we'll have to fill up to all fulfill our compliances. So that's why I need the clarity. How should we just reconsider this kind of things? Thank you so much.
Yeah, so Navedita has also clarified on, the foreigners being on the board. So you'll have to see if it's a foreigner, whether it satisfies the provisions in the act relating to foreigners being included, and those conditions are there. But however, for Indians and also essentially for OCIs and PIOs, the ministry is taking a lenient view. but one has to be very, very careful. So that's one aspect in relation to the residential status. But in terms of any particular action against them or in any matter that they are there, one has to be very, very careful, proactive in terms of knowing that and taking suitable action. All right.
Uh, Another question has come in on the similarity or dissimilarity between trusts and foundations. Would you like to take it, Sharad or Nivedita, either of you?
So, this word foundation is not defined anywhere. There is nothing called foundation. However, the corporates, when they are looking at, you know, uh, setting up their shop, as far as a charitable institution is concerned, they're calling it a foundation. So the foundation can be a Section 8 foundation. There's no specific, you know, uh, yes or no for using or not using the foundation word. But as Nivedita said, there are three forms of entities under which charitable work can be conducted in this country are society, trust, and a Section 8 company. Okay. So a Section 8 company, a trust, and a society is there. You might use the word foundation, but it really does not give any kind of differentiation in terms of law, although that's how people have been looking at. So, as far as the GST registration is concerned, I don't think we can answer that question, but I can say if you are covered under the exemption notification as a not-for-profit, uh, fulfilling the definition of charitable purpose, yes, well, you may be exempt. Otherwise, please look at the definition of taxable supply and also the thresholds as far as applicability of GST is concerned. Those are the three tests that need to be uh, no, applied. Now, as far as not-for-profits is concerned, there is no mandatory requirement for MSME.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Sharad. That was really helpful. And thank you for getting into covering so much, mm, so many different topics. And I'm sure we would like to deep dive into many of these. Maybe we could do another session, but also Sharad is always available on Patek to address so many of our queries. And thank you so much for your time, Sharad.